All right, well, welcome back to An Animals Attack, y'all. It's been a long time since I've done one of these. So typically when I do, videos like this, it's usually a unique story. You know what I mean? Like something that I haven't covered before, an animal that I haven't covered before, such as like the murder by snake story, the Mo the chimpanzee story as well. So that's, in case you haven't checked those out, then you can check those out as well. I'm going to remaster those, by the way. But before I ramble off or anything, today we're going to be talking about cassowaries. And to be honest with you, until about 2 years ago, I never really knew what cassowaries even were. You know what I mean? I thought it was like some kind of dish, to be honest with you. Now, in terms of cassowary attacks, there have been two of them that have been fatal. Okay, one of them which actually happened in the wild. That was the only fatal one that ever happened in the wild. And the other one occurred with someone that had the cassowary in captivity, unfortunately, while they were feeding it. Now, before we get into these attacks, like I said, these birds are very unique and they're very special. They're not your typical chickens or seagulls or whatever, common bird that you'll find out there. It's very important we go through these facts, I think, because it's because of just how the rarity and the uniqueness of this bird, right? So in terms of size, cassowaries, they are the third largest or the third tallest bird in the world, with ostriches being first and emus being second. And that's in terms of height. But when it comes to mass, that's another interesting thing, is they're actually the second most heaviest bird. Well, females can get up to 167 pounds, as I was saying. And I'll tell you why it's the females in a second. These birds are actually commonly regarded as murder birds or danger birds, which is it's quite intimidating, but it's not for no reason, okay? They are quite a formidable force. They have weapons, okay? These birds are known as the closest living relative to dinosaurs. And I also think it's important that, people know just how much damage these birds can actually cause. Now, before getting into these weapons, I will tell you that the people of Papua New Guinea, the indigenous people there, they actually believed cassowaries to be reincarnations of their female ancestors, which I found to be, pretty trippy, viewing an animal as a spirit. It's common in indigenous cultures, many indigenous cultures throughout the world. But just looking at the cassowary and look at this picture, you know what I mean? Like just imagining a spirit of your female ancestor in there, just coming up to you, like, how the birds do it. These land birds, they're magnificent, no doubt. They're beautiful, but it's their biology that sets them apart from other birds. Okay, so unlike other birds, these birds are actually female dominant. Most birds, like 99% of birds, bird species, they're actually male dominant, right? Like, for example, like a duck. You can see the difference between the males and the females here. Very easy to spot. The males, that's how they court the females. And this is a bird where, it's very rare to see this in birds. So they're part of that 1%. I'm not sure if they're the only, but I don't think they're the only ones, actually. I think there are a couple more birds. I'll see if I can pin the answer down in the comments here for you after this video. And what I mean by dominant is that the females, in other words, they're much more brightly colored. They're larger in size. And not to mention they're polyandrous, which means they mate with multiple males. And the males actually are the ones that take care of the eggs, and that's quite opposite of what you'd see in nature. Period. Like there's only a few species of animals, period, that do that. It's usually the females that are incubating the eggs and whatnot, like a mother hen. You know what I mean? But in this case, it's the men or the males rather that take care. The male cassowaries will be taking care of the eggs. And they also take care of them like close to, I think, 9 months or so, or nine months, or I can't remember exactly how long it was, but for quite a period of time, they will take care of the offspring, just so up until they're ready to, go off on their own, which is by the time they're about 3 years old, I think, is when they reach maturity. But I think they will probably leave being with the parents after about 9 months to a year, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I will correct that over here in the comments. So in terms of their physical characteristics, like I was saying, those weapons, they have 3-toed feet, each of which sport a claw that can reach up to 5 inches in length. And coupled with these extremely powerful kicks that they can launch, they use these claws to disembowel potential predators. And although they might be flightless birds, like I was saying, they're still excellent swimmers. They can run up to 31 miles per hour, so no humans outrunning that. And not to mention, these guys can jump 7 feet in the air, right? Like you're clearing Shaq. You know what I mean? You're basically clearing Shaq. That's insane. And I mean, if you had like, if birds could play ball, I'd have a cassowary would be my number one pick in the NBA. I'll tell you that, man. You could probably goat that bird, like, certified, stamped. Not to mention they probably have to raise the rims from like 10 to 20 feet. If you're jumping 7 feet in the air, you know what I mean? Jokes aside, even though cassowaries are widely known as frugivores, which means they mainly eat fruit, they're in fact omnivores, if you really look at it. So they will eat small vertebrates when the opportunity presents itself. And probably one of the coolest things about these birds is the fact that certain seeds, they actually only sprout once they have passed through a cassowary system. So there's literally some plants out there that can only be possible, or their existence can only be possible because of cassowaries. Not to mention there's this one, just remember there's this one fruit called the cassowary plum, which is actually toxic to most animals, but not to the cassowary. And it's actually toxic to humans as well. But cassowaries can eat it. So they also have very powerful immunomodulation properties. Clearly, there are some components from within that fruit which doesn't affect them whatsoever. So that's pretty cool as well. Not to mention, they have a very... I was listening to Tooth and Claw podcast, by the way, which inspired me to talk about the cassowary attack, as well as a bunch of other ones. I don't know if you've heard it before, but it's one of my favorite podcasts. I listen to it religiously. Wes, my buddy from Tooth and Claw, he is a bear biologist, but he talks about an array of different animals as well. So they played a cassowary growl, or a cassowary call, rather. And I swear to God, it sounded like a cougar growl. You know what I mean? Or like a mountain lion or something, or like a jaguar. Just low frequency growl. Because they have the lowest frequency growl. This is another cool fact. Out of all birds. So let me just play this cassowary call for you, because it's very unique. Just take a listen. So tell me that's not a trip, you know what I mean? Like, when I heard that, I was just like, God, like, I would think it's a big cat, or like a small big cat, if that makes sense. But like one of the smaller big cats, that's what I mean. But yeah, like that sounds like quite a bird, you know what I mean? Anyways, let's get into these attacks now, shall we? Okay, so the first attack happened in 1926, and it happened to a couple brothers. Their names were Phillip and Granville. I'm surprised I remember that name, but quite a name, eh? Granville McLean, okay? And they lived out in northeastern Australia in a very tropical, beautiful region with their family at a ranch. They would help their parents with their ranching activities, chores, help with the cattle, and just, they would do basic ranch life duties, you know what I mean? And like most Australians, they also knew that they're living in a land, or they're sharing a land rather, with some of the most dangerous predators, and creatures in the world. You're talking about saltwater crocodiles, you're talking about, venomous snakes and spiders, just to name a few. But on April 6th of 1926, probably the most unexpected of all these creatures happened to show up in the forest as the boys were playing outside. So 16-year-old Phillip McLean and his little brother, 13-year-old Granville. They were playing outside at the ranch. I assume they were probably doing chores or playing, whatever it was. But they notice a little far into the forest, they can see a cassowary. Very unexpected guest. And being little kids, even though like they're teens, one is in their early teens and one is in his early teens, and it's still really silly what they did. They decide that they're gonna grab some sticks. They call for their dogs, and they charge towards this cassowary with intentions of beating it to death. And they start chasing this thing into the forest. We've covered many different kinds of animal attacks on the channel, okay? And there have been, most of them have happened, due to unfortunate circumstances or someone's misfortune. Animals don't go out looking for people, you know what I mean, to eat, okay, in most cases, okay? They're not man-eaters like that. It's just unfortunate circumstances. But when you provoke an animal, especially one that you don't know much about, even science and modern science, they don't know much about, modern biologists don't know much about cassowaries. They're just learning more about them now. And their behavioral tendencies, especially when it comes to attacks. You don't go provoking that animal, okay? Especially, these things can grow up to 6 feet tall. The females can, that's like an NBA point guard, okay? Some of them, but yeah, they go. So that's what these guys decide to do. They grab their dogs, two dogs, and the two brothers. They go chasing after this cassowary into the woods. So as they approach the cassowary, they get a little close. Granville approaches it with a stick, and he's about to hit it. And the cassowary just jumps up in the air and kind of just kung fu's him, and he gets startled and he just runs off a little bit. So instead of, seeing this as a sign that maybe we shouldn't mess with this bird, maybe we should just leave it alone, it's giving us a warning that don't mess with me, man. I know kung fu. But jokes aside, okay, on the reels, you don't want to mess with a bird like this. Come on, please. Imagine messing with an ostrich. This is a smaller ostrich. You know what I mean? I wouldn't mess with an ostrich. Have you seen their face? Just their faces creep me out. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it in a bad way. They're not ugly or anything, but geez, man, look at this thing. I would not want to get that thing angry or provoke it. You know what I mean? And then look at this thing. That's what we're dealing with here. You want to get this angry? With those talons? Nah, man. No, not me. I'm good. I'm good for that. Anyways. So like I was saying, instead of heeding these warning signs, clear warning signs, Philip progresses and presses on with this attack. And 16-year-old Philip. And he goes on with his dog. And just as he gets close, and I guess at this point, this cassowary probably just had enough. And it just felt like its life was threatened, which it was. And so it just launches into the air and unleashes this powerful kick straight into Philip's throat, slits his throat, and then Phillips just falls to the ground. He gets back up, and he walks a few steps, and then he falls back down, and he bleeds out and dies right on the spot, in front of his brother and the dogs. So, this one was a tough read, man. It was a tough listen. I heard it on the podcast, Tooth and Claw podcast first, and it was a very tough read. Because, seriously, man, why provoke the situation? It was doing its own thing. This is just a big lesson not to provoke dangerous animals or animals you don't know much about. This was back in 1926, granted. They probably didn't know much about cassowaries, but regardless, you don't go messing with them. And that's what these kids did. And now a brother lost his life and a family lost their son. And that was just really tragic to read. So now let's talk about that second fatal cassowary attack. The second one happened in Florida, actually, just in 2019. It was about April of 2019 or so, when a Florida man who had been feeding his pet cassowary somehow fell over in the enclosure, and the cassowary just attacked him, just started ripping him to shreds. He had he had 12 lacerations. The sharp talons, they basically gave him slashing cuts in his and wounds, really deep puncture wounds throughout his body. But the main decisive blow was the major artery in his arm that was severed, unfortunately, the brachial artery, and that caused him to bleed to death. And unfortunately, Marvin Hayos was his name, or Hajos. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Please correct me in the comments if I'm not. He was 75 years old. His face was also severed. His neck, his back, his abdomen, thighs, legs, his right arm. the whole enchilada. Um, and yeah, like I said, investigators, they couldn't really, piece together what happened because he was alone. But it seemed like he just fell over somehow, and the cassowary just attacked him. And it was very unfortunate and tragic. But that's pretty much all the information we have on that one. But those are the two fatal cassowary attacks. Now, the third and final attack I want to talk about with you guys. And this is going to be quick, but I had to include this one. Because, I don't like making jokes on this channel a lot, but the name of this victim, Bodo Wintergerst, was probably the most Lord of the Rings sounding name I've heard on the Tooth and Claw podcast or that I've ever said on this channel. So that one, that killed me. He, unfortunately, the story is not as funny. I don't mean to call his name funny or anything. I feel mean about this, but regardless, the story is pretty gnarly. Like how he ends up getting attacked. So he claims that a cassowary kicked him while he was out camping in a forest, and this is obviously in Australia where cassowaries are, and it was on September 11th of 1991 at about 2 p.m. He went out of his campsite or like trailer. I think he had a trailer, and he came outside and he squatted to toilet in the rainforest to take a number 2, and a cassowary just came up from behind him, and while he was squatting, it just like started clawing and kicking at him, and it lacerated his forearm, his chest, and his groin. So his scrotum was cut open. Linear cuts required 9 stitches. So yeah, he got attacked pretty bad on the left side of his scrotum. That was pretty gnarly. And so there you have it. The cassowary attacks that I felt were the most noteworthy, at least to me. There are more cassowary attacks. I will leave a link in the description that you guys can check out. The source that I actually got this from was I heard it on the Tooth and Claw, but they heard it on this one memoir which was posted by a Christopher Coffrin, and he studies case histories of attacks by the cassowary in Queensland. So do check out that memoir. It has quite a bunch of different. It has pretty much a whole list of his findings on there with specifics on these cassowary attacks. If you guys are interested in that. Also, what I wanted to let you know was that I did just launch the new When Animals Attack Patreon. Now, this is called When Animals Attack X. It's uncensored. There are many different perks on there. You're gonna get basically. I'm gonna offer one When Animals Attack exclusive episode per month on there. You're gonna get merch discounts, the whole enchilada. You guys should check out that About Me section on the Patreon page in case you guys want to know more about it. But yeah, other than that, before I ramble on, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say. But thanks again for watching, and have yourself a wonderful day. Peace.